Welcome to Wellspring on the Air. I'm Tova, co-founder and president of Wellspring Counseling. And today we have a show called Stories We Tell Ourselves. And with me, I have Mario de Armas, one of our therapists. And together we're going to just talk about the narratives that we have in our heads, the stories we tell ourselves, and how that affects our lives. So Mario, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tova. Great to be here.
Tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Well, I received my degree in mental health counseling from Barry University. I am a newbie here at Wellspring, loving every minute of it. I also have a background in theology, obtained my master's from St. Vincent de Paul, and I've had a lot of pastoral experiences, for instance, working as a hospital chaplain in the oncology floor, and a lot of work in youth ministry. So I really enjoy the blending of counseling with spirituality and really looking at the person in a holistic way.
Yeah, and that's why we've hired you. We're so glad to have you with us. So today we're going to talk about narratives and stories we tell ourselves. I think it's kind of a fun topic to think through. And so, Mario, I'm going to let you just introduce it. What do you mean by narratives and stories we tell ourselves?
I think there are certain beliefs that we've adopted, and life circumstances, because it's so deeply ingrained, they reinforce those original narratives we've, absorbed. So I'll case in point, I was not a very good student growing up. And oftentimes in the middle of an instruction point, I would doze off. And I was the person with papers all over the place on my desk. It looked like there was an explosion in my work area. And I grew up in high school being a poor student too. And the constant narrative was, I'm stupid. I'm not smart enough. I'll never be smart enough, so why even try? Now, the way I tackled that issue was in the social light. I was a social butterfly and developed a strong social intelligence to compensate for the self-appointed dumb card that I gave myself. And as an adult, where I started doing better academically, that wound lingered. And I started asking myself in a reflecting way, like, where did this come from? And I went back to a couple memories in first grade and even before, where teachers looked disappointed, where people looked startled because I didn't get the concept fast enough. And it was truly this sense of, I'm dumb, I'm not good enough. And in any academic setting, I felt inferior. So I proactively pursued ways to heal that, through counseling, through prayer, through journaling, in terms of getting to the bottom of this, because it became very taxing on my life. And I hated a belief that I knew was limiting, but by the same token, I perceived to be true. And whatever people perceive to be true, they're not worthy of a woman, they're not lovable, they're not confident. You tell yourselves these things repeatedly and they translate into your life. I can remember in 5th grade being called weird by a pretty girl. And the pretty girl was sent by her friend to talk on her behalf because her friend liked me. But all that stayed in my mind was, you're weird, you're weird. And it's funny how impactful that moment was. And one of the key motivations I have as a counselor is to help people identify those stories and reframe those stories. Because ultimately that limited bubble becomes your existence, and got to put a stop to it.
So we can tell ourselves true stories and we can tell ourselves limiting belief and false stories. I think the key here is that we actually pursue what's true. So, and that's a spiritual journey of healing for when what we've told ourselves our lives, and we have an enemy, we have the devil who wants to accuse us, who wants to limit us by believing things that aren't true, that we're not lovable, that we're not worthy, that we're not good enough, all sorts of negative things. And the Bible tells us what's true about us. And even the truth of some of our actual limits. So I worked with a young girl once who really had learning disabilities. And, she could tell herself, I'm stupid, or she could say, the truth was she did have. And so the other truth, as she really overcame it in a beautiful way, is I have to work a little harder than other people to get the same results, but I can do it. Now that was still, there was truth there. It's not like you're telling yourself a new false lie. If I thought I was 6 feet tall and strong, it'd be different. That's not true. So the key is to move our stories into God's truth about us, his value about us, who we are, the things we've gone through. We do have handicaps, but that doesn't mean that, clearly you had issues there in school, but look at you with a master's degree and a teacher and a therapist, and clearly this did not limit you. And
God's sense of humor. Now I'm an instructor. Right. So it goes to show you. And what I've noticed is that in my case, I speak for myself, I was very single-minded, oblivious to the other examples that people would bring up. And I would just stick to this first grade scenario where a teacher said, you're all over the place, you're a mess. Or in third grade when a teacher said, you're going to fail the year. And that haunted me. But then I started to open the pages of my past a little bit more and realized my memory, especially long-term memory, was always solid. And there were things that I can sort of pull out from those filing cabinets in my mind. And people would say, how did you remember that? Or the time that in my philosophy circle, I was the tutor for that particular class setting, that they trusted me. And suddenly tapping into those memories helped offset the previous ones. But for a while, even the same with regards to being called weird, that had a very damaging effect. But then I looked at myself and said, listen, I had a great upbringing and I had girlfriends here and there, and some girls liked me, some girls didn't. But for a while, it was just single-minded, no, you're this, you're this. And that tone that's from the enemy is a contrast to God's peaceful infiltration of the heart. Like God's in the peace, and everyone that I respect as a spiritual teacher has always said that a great indicator of God is the peace within. Even in the midst of turbulent times, God's peace is steadfast.
Well, I think you've hit on something important that the behavioral sciences have shown. And there are huge bodies of literature on this, research project after research project that basically show us and that we see what we already believe. So science has shown us that we see what we already believe. So let's take, for example, you want to buy a certain type of car. And once you have begun to focus on that and you think that's the car for you, you'll begin to see it everywhere. And you'll begin to notice it in ads, and you'll say, oh, the right people have that car and this is the right car. And you notice everything that proves what you already believe. And that science shows that you also will not notice. So let's say there's a bad report on that car. You won't notice it. Literally won't see it. And so we have this thing where we don't see what isn't in our belief systems, like you not seeing the good things you did in school because you had a larger belief system. So you don't notice those things. And it's a profound, do we believe what we see or do we see what we believe?
Oh, no question. No question.
And it's both. It's really both. And so healthy people go back and say, I'm going to choose consciously to see all the proof on all the sides. Is this true? We challenge it. And what's the evidence on all sides of this belief I have? And so science says, we see what we believe when we believe what we see, but mostly it's we see what we already believe.
And how it's reflected on your behavior. If I sat on the day that you interviewed me for Wellspring with the outcome fixed, she's not going to hire me, she's going to zone in on this particular tendency, it's a lost cause. If that's already the outcome that I've foreseen, everything from my body language to my tone to my eye contact will reflect the outcome I've already conceived in my mind. Same with anything else, whether it's the job or whether it's a guy approaching a woman he finds attractive or any of life's scenarios. If you already believe that you're not good enough or it's a lost cause, it's unbelievable how that manifests in behavior. It really is. And then, like I said, you're blinded to the other instances where you were able to thrive. But tell an athlete now that he shouldn't even play the game because he's going to get annihilated. It's already preconditioning the mind. So it's unbelievable, but it's difficult when it's been our habitual trajectory, and sometimes it takes that awareness to stop and then to be conscientious, as you said, and say, at this moment, I'm going to hold on to this thought and be proactive in it.
Well, so how do we overcome this, Mario?
I would say, number one, to revert back to moments in your past where you have been successful in school, or when someone celebrated your intelligence, where the contrast to the narrative you've developed is refuted. So you can see from life's experiences that there's another narrative there. And then in that moment, I could say, remember this, or I can recall that. And then with a healthy repetition, you start to recite a different story. And as the mind trickles down to the heart and translates into behavior, any moment that's a setback is just that. There's not a finality to it. Like, oh, you didn't get this job, but you're equipping yourself for future employment opportunities. Because once your narrative has been redeemed and you could see yourself as a child of God, worthy of success and worthy of love and worthy of these things, then suddenly any hiccup is just that, a hiccup, but there's not this doom and gloom outcome.
Yeah, I think you're really right. There's the step of recognizing we have a narrative, even as opposed to thinking it's true. Even the idea that this is a narrative versus this is truth can start, because we have narratives our families teach us about everything, about who we are, about races, about our beliefs, about what we should do, what's valuable in the world, even our faith. So recognizing this is my narrative, and then to challenge that narrative. Is it true? Does it stand up to scripture? Does it stand up to real evidence and experience in my life? And what is God's truth about me? So we examine it, and then moving, like you said, into practicing it and getting new exposure and new experiences that reinforces the new belief. We need to practice it, walk in it. We need to use our imaginations to picture it as true, and then we begin to behave as if it's true, and then we begin to have new experiences that it's true, and we rewrite that narrative. So I think you've just done a great job talking about the stories we tell ourselves, and it's really important that we recognize we have these narratives and that we need to rewrite them. We have a few scriptures about this. I know you wanted to mention a couple of them.
I did. As a matter of fact, we have in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4, Paul states, I am not conscious of anything against me, but I do not thereby stand acquitted. The one who judges me is the Lord. So it's almost like Paul reaffirming that the one who values, the one who validates, the one who affirms is God. So there might be a lot of narratives circulating, but we ultimately cling to the notion that we are loved and we are appreciated. And it's funny, a lot of people do affirmations in the morning, even a simple affirmation of I'm a child of God, I'm worthy of love, I'm strong, right? Those affirmations bring about this repetition that goes beautifully and blends beautifully with the scripture passage. There's also from the Gospel of John. So you have John chapter 7, verse 24. Stop judging by appearances, but judge justly. And that kind of goes again with the vein that God is the one that peers into the heart. And later on, he talks about, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And that's John 8, verse 32. Yeah. So coming to that truth of your identity and identifying the lies for what they are, then renders you anchored in the truth of God's love directed to you. And that has an incredible power.
It's true. And on that really powerful note, it's time to wrap up. Thank you, Mario. This is Tova Krebs with Wellspring on the Air, because hearts and minds matter.